So this morning I offered some suggestions on the dullness, the environment, one of dullness. And it's good to remember that we talk about Buddhist practice, and it's very true that what we're doing is we're developing skills. We have a certain amount of theory, but you don't need that much theory. In fact, if you have too much theory, it can lead to more doubt. When you look at the volumes of books, you have the suttas, you have the commentaries, you have the Burmese commentaries, you have the Thai commentaries. Now you have Farang commentaries. Mamma mia. So although it's helpful, too much knowledge is really can actually be confusing. How much knowledge do you need? Well, you need enough information that you can, I would say, train with it, practice with it. So if you're like, let's say you're a chef at a high-end restaurant in Bangkok and you're the chief cook, say, and that must be a really tough job. You imagine, like, maybe there's 50 people in a restaurant and all the orders are coming in and you have to make the food from scratch. It's not McDonald's frozen and thawed, and everything has to be hot and beautiful and has to come out hot and beautiful. That's an amazing skill, isn't it? You think about it. So there had to be some learning. But then there had to be a lot of practice before the person became the head cook. To be a parent, I can't imagine how you can be a parent. It is beyond me. That must be so difficult, because when you get married and have a child, they don't give you a book, do they? Parenting, I guess you just do it. I mean, you have the models of your own parents, and I guess you have you too, I don't know. But that obviously must be a skill that you develop. So skills are part of our human capacity. We are makers. We are doers. We can make things. So whether it's the skill of a spreadsheet, like I know some people that will, like, organize a retreat. A friend in Singapore who loves to make spreadsheets. He just loves spreadsheets. I say, yeah, why not? I mean, I couldn't make a spreadsheet. I can't boil an egg, but he loves making spreadsheets, and that's a skill. Whether you're doing code as a programmer, or you're a parent, or you're organizing a retreat, these are all very, very much part of being a skillful human being. And so the idea of bhavana, metta bhavana, or whatever, is the idea of developing skill. So let's say this morning I just made a suggestion around how you might deal with dullness. That's just my suggestion. And it's kind of severe, right? And obviously you can't do that all the time. But if it tastes good, like, well, this might work. This might work. Then somehow you do have to follow that. You have to follow that and train in it and develop skill, so that each time, so that you become really good at dullness, not falling asleep. You don't become good at being dull. You become very, very adept at the nivarana of dullness. And that's very important, because if we're going to enter into the silence of the mind and explore the subtleties of self and not self and doer and that, we need to have some sustained clarity of mind. And so anytime your meditation isn't going well, you have pain, or you feel restless, you feel dull, there's a lot of resentment coming through your mind because someone insulted you, you feel regret because you didn't see someone who died, or all these different things as human beings we have. That is the practice. That is bhavana, whatever's coming up. And then you have to have enough intelligence and creativity and intuition to deal with it. And that's where a fixed technique is dangerous. You just fix a technique. Oh, this is what you do day in and day out. Well, life is constantly changing. So I think I offered you a technique that I like to use around dullness and sleepiness. So it's just a sort of suggestion, but then how do you use that creatively? You know, how do you make that your own? And skills need to be done a lot. You think about driving a car in Bangkok. I mean, that's a horror show. I can't imagine how anyone. I sit in the car. Oh no, I was going to go into that. It's really painful. You know, we have wide roads. The soy that the Dhammaram's on. How do they get two cars to go by? I still haven't figured that out. So yeah, to drive in Bangkok, you have to be skillful. But I would be petrified. I could never develop that skill. And many of you have a driver, I've noticed, which is a good idea. So if there's something difficult that comes up in your practice, like a narrow soy in Bangkok with a lot of traffic, well, that's where you have to learn to drive. And then those very difficulties heighten your skill. So if you get a whole retreat of dullness, you may say, oh, if I didn't have dullness, I'd have a good retreat. Yeah, but you've got dullness. Deal with it, work with it. If you look at it the other way, okay, now I can really train and understand dullness. This is what this retreat is about for me. And then that will pay dividends every retreat, because now you've got the skill around that. Restlessness is sort of the opposite, where you just can't stay still. You know, your mind just looks at the clock every 30 seconds, and your body can't stay still. And okay, so what do I do with that one? What do I do with restlessness? Well, first of all, you have to recognize that it's difficult to stay still. You have to recognize that you're restless. Now, that might not sound like much, but quite often people who feel restless, they just try harder. They just have to try harder. And actually, it makes them more restless, because they don't recognize that, well, what's going on? I've got too much energy. There's too much vitality. I'm bouncing around like a ping pong ball here. What's going on? So actually somehow stepping back and having the intelligence, say, well, what's actually going on now? Rather than just trying. And that's, again, the danger of holding to some fixed technique. Techniques are all right, but it really is an intelligent practice. You have to be very, very intelligent. So with restlessness, usually like the opposite of dullness, it's actually doing less. It's like not trying so hard. It's like Luangpor said, just be a bag of rice. Now, if you do that, if you're dull, be a bag of rice, you will be a bag of rice. That's not going to work. But if if you're restless and you're trying hard, do the breath. No, just relax. Nowhere to go. Nothing's going to happen. I've got all day to be here. So suggestions are important. You can make suggestions to the mind, which are actually very, very powerful. And again, that goes back to Samma Sankappa, right understanding, then right thought, and then right effort. You can see how those are always working together. But if you don't have right understanding, then you won't have right thought, and you won't have right effort. And then you can see the logic of right understanding is Benyang Ni Eng. It's like this. You always have to come back to that. In a sense, that's the beginning and end of the practice. This is the kind of irony, because that's what you want to sustain for long. That's the kind of ultimate skill that we're trying to sustain and develop, is the capacity to know things just as they are. Just as they are. And the habits, the dullness and the craving and all that, create the complexities around that, the judgments. Let's say, like we were talking, one of the gentlemen who's not here now was talking about the digger working on the king's birthday. the 5th of December. And it's supposed to be a holiday, correct? Yeah. Even with a new king, it's still a holiday. Okay. And he, he felt, wait, that's not right. These guys shouldn't be working. What kind of respect is that? Right? And that's a logical judgment, but it's still a judgment. And you could say, yeah, that's correct. It shouldn't be this way, but it is this way. And so if you never say it is this way, and you're just coming from a judgment or a bias or whatever, then you never have right understanding. But right understanding is, well, there's this sound now. There's a digger working. And then what is being created with my own mind on top of that? Now, even though there's the judging mind maybe on top of that, at least now you know, oh, judgment feels this way. And then you have a chance of working with that. So then you have things like dosa. Dosa is another nivarana. And dosa is resistance in some way. So I hear the sound, and basically I don't want the sound. It shouldn't be that way. And I'm right. And you could agree with me. We're both right. We can make a political party, and all of us are right. You're still suffering. So then the training and then the skill in Ben Yang Ni Eng is also the training in this idea that this is Dharma, the coarseness of the sound of the digger, and in an inappropriate time, etc., etc. It's all part of nature. It's this Dharma. So then you say, oh, okay. So what's the problem? Where's the problem arise? And the problem is dosa. So you've diagnosed the problem. You're like a doctor. You have to see what the problem is. And this is very creative. And even though these are simple examples, we can all understand that very, very easily. It's amazing how we get fooled. Mara just creeps in, and all of a sudden we're suffering. How did that happen? So if you see that the basic skill that we're trying to develop moment by moment is suchness, Ben Yang Ni Eng, it's like this, is not a comment on the moment. When I say it's like this, it's before I make a comment. It's the silence of knowing, before perception, before judgment, before analysis, before any kind of bias comes in. And I find the listening is really good for that. Because, if you contemplate listening as a kind of attitude to the moment, it's very receptive. And then listening as a kind of model for awareness. I used to think that awareness was control. So I have to have more sati. I need to have more sati. So what does that mean? More sati is like, so I need to control, I need to make sure that the kilesa don't come up into my mind, and I just try to control things rather than awaken to them. And awakening is much, much different than controlling. I think all of us have enough experience that we're probably seeing the fallacy of control. It doesn't work. I mean, just indulging doesn't work either. But the awakening of the mind is always this opening. So we were talking about space, like the contemplation of space. And that's a very, very odd kind of thing to consider. But if you have followed Luangpor Sumedho's teaching on the way he talks, he's contemplated space and consciousness a lot as boundless, as this kind of boundless space within which the world is arising and ceasing. And that's the way we define the world. The world is that which arises and ceases in consciousness, rather than being an objective reality. So in your own practice, look at the attempt to control, or to get rid of, or to figure out, or to analyze as extra to the way things are. That's added. Not that analysis is bad, not that you can't do things, but first and foremost, you have to get to right understanding, Binyang Niang, and then the silence of that, it's just like this, and then the waiting, and then usually you get the resolution from that. So in the kind of nivarana, you have doubt, you have dosa, you have doubt is one of the hindrances, and that's just thinking. Thinking leads to more thinking. If you want to really have a lot of doubt, then read more. Read more Buddhism. Sometimes I'll do that. I mean, not anymore. I used to. I'll have some doubt. And then I'll look in the library and see somewhere there's the answer. I know it. And I'll pick a complicated book. Big mistake. In fact, I used to do that in university. If I wanted to read I thought I should read like the Western philosophers, so I'd pick up Heidegger or Kant or all these characters, and I just get a headache, and my mind would be spinning. And then I thought I was stupid because I didn't understand them, but I was just making myself suffer. I said, what are they saying? And I was just in thought all the time. So my dad was, he was a lawyer in Latvia, and then he lost that profession when he was a refugee. And his thesis was, when you've read more, you'll know more. So that was always around thinking. And so he was an incredible consumer of ideas. And if he would have lived to see the internet, he would have blown his brains out, I think. Because he was just always reading and making lists and so on. And because he was a lawyer, I never won any arguments with him. But I think once I almost got there. And then he pulled it on me. He said, when you've read more, you'll know more. I said, so he was very smart that way. And then when I came back my parents found it very difficult, me being a monk, because culturally it was like, I might as well be in Mars. They had no cultural sense. So they thought I was lost in a cult. They thought I was really gone. And when Luangpor Cha was in England, I invited Mom to meet him. She didn't trust him at all. She looked at him, you got my son. I don't like you. Luangpor Cha was just charming, but poor Mom. So anyway, my parents, I know you can't blame them. They're from Europe. They're from, really sophisticated society, very cosmopolitan. This guy shows up. So getting their heads past their own fears, it took about 5 years, before they said, oh, maybe it's good for him. In any case, I came back after about 7 years. I hadn't been back to Canada, and my dad was kind of on board now. He could see there was some sense of pride. And then I told him about no thought. I said, one of the things we explore is no thought. He said, impossible. Impossible. Shunyata, impossible. It's not, no, you can't do this. He just had nothing in his realm touched that, because thought was so very, very important. Thought, analysis, and conclusion. And thought is fantastic, but it is not nibbana. It's not the unconditioned, it is conditioned. So with right thinking, how do we use right thought to take up our awareness into deep silence? I would say that's what we're trying to do. Silence is important. Silence is very interesting and helpful and refreshing. How do you get there? How do you get there? Well, you begin with, it's like this, because that's silent. Right? And then you watch how the noise arises, the judgments, the dullness, the restlessness, how a sense of self is created, that it comes and goes. And as you see the sense of self coming as thought, you get it more and more. You say, well, that's just a thought. That's not my real home. You see it objectively. You see that as an object. And you get better and better at it. It's very, very kind of slow kind of. But it's not spectacular. I think We agreed to that. It's not like you can get spectacular experiences. I've heard, I'm told, in meditation, and I think many of us have in our first attempts at controlling the mind. But think about it: how long did they last? You know, and but then what does endure? You think, well, wait a minute, that came and went. It was really great. It was really neat, and I would like that all the time, but it did change. Did change, but what's unchanging? And so you start to have a different kind of inquiry, And so what I'd like to just introduce in this meditation, and Yom Pui reminded me of this, this past 2 years, I've been using various curious questions, I would say, around awareness. So I was using, is presence ever absent? You know, that's the kind of, what's he talking about? And that's what I want. That's the response I want from it. What's he talking about? Is presence, so what is presence? Well, how do you define presence? It's PRESENCE, not TS. It's not Christmas presents. Okay, for those who do an English lesson. Presence. So how would you say presence in time? Anyone? Again? No? Come on, let's have it. Presence. Just, I know that I'm here now, right? How would you say that? Tini dioni, here and now. Okay? All right, so anyway, it's not Christmas presents for sure. We're clear on that. But isn't that the one incontrovertible fact, is that there is presence. You can't deny that. Consciousness, right? All right. So then I ask, is presence ever absent? You may feel absent-minded. You may be thinking about the restaurant in Bangkok or driving through the sois of Bangkok or whatever, but was presence ever absent? And that's an investigation rather than a philosophical book I could title. And so what else was I using? I was using, is awareness separate from experience? That's what Yom Pui reminded me of. Is awareness separate from experience? Is awareness the same as experience? Now, these kinds of questions, you're not really looking for an answer. You're bringing the question up to brighten the mind, to observe the way things are, actually to come back to Penyang Ni Eng, to come back to the same silence. And that there is something about a question, if it's used without the desire for an answer. If you use it with a desire for an answer, then you just think more. Is presence ever absent? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Well, sometimes it seems to be. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. And then you're just thinking. That's not the point of it. You might as well do Christmas presents then. So the point of it is actually silence. So maybe I'll just introduce some of those. And if you get confused, you can fire me. But if that kind of practice doesn't work and it just creates more thought, then just drop it. Don't use it. But what I'm just trying to introduce are various ways that Buddhist cultures have inquired into the sense of silence, consciousness, and how they've touched that in continual ways. So let's stretch the legs and see how this one goes. Okay, so awakening to the way things are. And let's say maybe the goal of our practice, the skill we're developing is this capacity to sustain for long periods of time this very simple sense of knowing what life is like right now before we comment, before we analyze, before we judge, just the way it is. So it's like this. And so there's different ways you can heighten that or sustain that. And if I give you too many ways of doing this and you get confused, then my apologies, and just do the breath or whatever you like. Let's say if we listen to sound, so the sound you could say is an object in awareness, one way of thinking or perceiving. Notice the changing nature of sound. And maybe that heightens the observation, but it's still the same puru. So if during this meditation then you get sleepy, then use that or whatever technique you want. But if your mind is fairly clear, then you can explore awareness itself. So awareness, knowing, does that have a boundary? Can you find like an edge to awareness? And notice how that strange question just brightens the mind into observation of the way things are. And you don't really need an answer. Can you find any limit to the right? Or any limit to the left in awareness? Above and below? Is there any limit in front of you? Behind? And contemplate space. Does space have any limit? Now try. Is awareness separate from experience? Say, listen to sound. And is awareness separate from sound? Is awareness the same as sound? And notice how the question really makes you attentive. Is awareness separate from sound? Is it the same as sound? Now feel your body. Is awareness of the body different from awareness of sound? Awareness of body, is it separate from bodily feeling? Is it the same? And then just the suggestion is be that awareness. So that kind of sets up Ben Yang Yang, or it's like this. And then as the dullness comes or restlessness comes, can you see those as objects that come and go, or do you get caught as the subject? If you're caught as the subject, then you have I thoughts, me thoughts, dullness, and then that's where you train. That's the bhavana. And what is the training? To return to this, how is it now? It's like this, to the silence of knowing. Okay, I'll leave that and we'll sit in silence for the rest.